Another well-established director that credited Kurosawa with his success was Scorsese. Let me say it simply, he summed up in 2009, Kurosawa was my master. The Japanese Golden Age has had a long-lasting impact on cinema and beyond, in many forms. For instance, a phrase used in psychology as well as films has roots in Kurosawa's first film, the Rashomon effect, is contrary interpretations of the same event by different people. Rashomon is the first in the family of Japanese film titans that dominate the discussion on the Golden Age, but most notably, it is the first of them to speak to the audience's understanding of the nature of truth, the philosophy of justice, and the goodness of man. What's more, it's a movie that is packed with action and mystery and ultimately an ambiguous ending, leaving the audience to think on those very themes. In the movie Rashomon, we, as the audience, are lied to, a uniquely Kurosawa trait and at the time revolutionary. The entire movie arranged itself in relation to this, the story being told through the accounts of those present at the time, after the fact. The movie is primarily told from the perspective of 5 characters, those being the husband, the wife, the woodcutter, Tajumaru, and to a lesser extent, the priest. All the audience sees is reliant upon these characters, meaning that anything that we see in the flashbacks may or may not have happened. This motif is reflective of reality. Through this technique, the audience is taken away from its usual godlike status of omnipresent and instead is placed into the shoes of a character in the movie, offering an entirely fresh and highly thought-provoking style and story.
In Yasujiro Ozu's Tokyo Story, the unique style, themes, and camera position exhibits its distinctive attributes. Ozu keeps the camera in one specific position throughout the entire film. In the mature Ozu picture, the camera is always in the same position, 3 feet off the floor, the viewpoint of the person sitting in a Japanese room. It rarely pans or dollies. The only punctuation is the straight cut, Ozu saying it reminded him of a roll of toilet paper. This low camera angle allows the audience to feel like they are in the same room with the characters of Tokyo Story. Ozu uses another technique to enhance this effect. In many scenes, the camera is positioned directly in front of the characters, so the viewers would feel like the characters are speaking to them. Roger Ebert states that the camera really moves in Tokyo Story. Ozu reveals that beauty is found when standing still to the viewers through the static shots. The viewers would then observe the intricacy of each setting. Japan after World War II became modernized in a way that changed the value systems of its inhabitants. The post-war generation in most industrial societies was leading to a gradual shift from materialist values, which emphasizes economic and physical security above all, toward post-materialist priorities, which emphasizes self-expression and the priority of lives. Ozu wants to encourage the latter to focus on the change of family structure during this time period. In the modern world, people move so fast, like the train, that they might not take the time to notice the beauty of our world.
New Hollywood was a movement in the film industry from the late 1960s through the 1970s. The movement started with The Graduate and Bonnie and Clyde, both released in 1967. As auteur-crafted films that would influence the future of movie making, these films saw less influence from their production studios and more influence from their directors, allowing new brands of creative authorship that broke away from the people's existing expectations of what Hollywood films could be, representing a productive union between the studio and the director, in which the director takes creative control of the film. New Hollywood resulted in commercially viable pictures that explored previously taboo subjects in innovative new ways. New Hollywood isn't so much a style of filmmaking as it is a movement and a period of time. It refers to a post-Hays liberation of creativity ushered in by a generation of young filmmakers who took the primary authorial role away from studios and into their own hands. Their style, production process, and storytelling approach opposed what people expected of Hollywood films prior to this point. No longer were films produced solely for commercial gain. Instead, the studio system worked in conjunction with viewing films as an art and reviving creativity of expression.
Given the name of New Hollywood by the press, films were financed mostly by major studios and introduced a new stylistic approach that differentiated from the studio tradition. With the influence of the revolutionary new waves of cinema from Europe, they recreated some classic genres from Hollywood, genres such as the crime film, the western, and the war film. Doing so offered a more critical view of America's past and present. Alternating characteristics are also to be recognized in New Hollywood films. For instance, 70s films showed a perverse tendency to integrate, in narratively related ways, story and stylistic devices that are counterproductive to the film's essential narrative purposes. Narration in most of the classical films progresses through psychological motivation, by the desire of a character and its challenge towards obstacles at a defined goal. The ending is usually accompanied by a distinct resolution. With the contract of the New Hollywood, however, films have begun to introduce characters where this psychological motivation is vague and the characters are seemingly confused. It places an uncommon emphasis on irresolution, particularly at the moment of climax, prompting spectator response with more uncertainty and discomfort than those of more typical Hollywood cinema. In addition, New Hollywood are starting to introduce films with non-linear timeline were previously unaccepted, except for occasional flashbacks.
Industrial Light and Magic is a company that was founded by George Lucas so he was able to meet the visual demands of his original 1977 blockbuster film. For example, they had to shoot a moving spaceship in space and they obviously could not go to space and shoot it. John Dykstra, a visual effects supervisor on Star Wars, came up with a computer-controlled motion camera system to allow the illusion that the spaceship is actually flying in space. They filmed the spaceship in front of a green screen and moved the camera around the miniature spaceship by controlling it from a computer. Another example would be when the Death Star is being blown up. They used a Vision Vista camera. This was basically just an older type of 35mm film camera where the film ran horizontally instead of vertically through the camera gate, which then means that there was a larger area of the film negative to capture miniatures and other elements on, which then creates crispier composites. So when the Death Star is being blown up, it's just a pattern being blown up in a parking lot.